Good afternoon, good evening, good morning. These introductions and these greetings and salutations are one of my favorite parts about Common Time because it continues to prove to me that we are truly a global platform, which is why I always have to go through my entire spread of greetings. We are here once again. My name is Michael Skillern, and this is another iteration of our interview series here at Common Time from the Education and Outreach team called CommonTime One-on-One. As you know, CommonTime is your all-inclusive, purpose-built arts platform looking to connect artists, individuals, arts organizations, and educators. Once again, I am Michael Skillern. Quick housekeeping before we get to our esteemed guest today is we are in the middle of the Common Time giving campaign, where if you go to commontime.online and you book your engaging interactive virtual session with an artist that has a little red Christmas gift box in their profile header, we will be gifting one session of equal value to a school that's a member of the Global Schools Forum. It's a group of about a few thousand schools in the Southern Hemisphere that have a quite limited access to education, and we are giving arts education to those people through your generosity and your interest and commitment to the arts. So, without further ado, we have Jimmy Chiang here. Am I pronouncing your last name correctly?
Yeah, just fine. They both Europeans call it Jimmy Chiang, Jimmy Chang, as they
Okay.
would pronounce the ang with ang, but in the States, I lived there as well, and they call me Jimmy Chiang.
And I saw you used to live in Texas. My mom lived in
Yes,
Dallas for a long time. We have,
yes.
I'll do the US version. We have Jimmy Chiang here. And just, he needs no introduction, but for those of you who don't know, Jimmy Chiang is currently a pianist and conductor from Hong Kong. And you are the Kapellmeister. That's my best German with the Vienna Boys Choir, which I had the pleasure of seeing on tour in little old Columbus, Georgia, maybe 15 years ago. One of my favorite things that he has done in his career is he was an assistant on the ring cycle, which if you don't know is a 450-hour musical experience. But it's beautiful. It's a beautiful story. Yeah, it's a story that's been told a lot of times. It's probably one of the highlights of your career when I was reading about it. Jimmy is special to us here at Common Time for a lot of reasons, but one of them is he began his musical training at a very young age. So he's had a music education, obviously, with his career path. He's been a part of a lot more of young kids' music education as well. And he's also a Common Time artist. You can see his artist profile at commontime.online and get in touch with him about having a conversation like the one I'm about to have with him today. So please welcome to Common Time One-on-One, Jimmy Chiang. Yes. There is a studio audience behind me. You can't see or hear them, but I promise they're back there and they're clapping. So, Maestro, how are you doing? Like, and I asked that sincerely. Like, how you doing? How you feeling these days?
I'm doing great. Because we're having a break right now. We still have couple more
Okay.
days. We'll start again on next Monday, again rehearsals, and at the same time, I'm preparing the Marriage of Figaro, Noche di
Oh
Figaro.
wow.
Yes, and which Common Time is also promoting and will be streaming,
Hmm.
not to say, and so that's a lot of actually, for me, I'm always busy, let's say, and
Yeah.
and that's always good. When I used to, I actually hardly get sick, maybe
Hmm.
once a year, and I'm not
Yeah.
joking, and it's my all these years of my life, it's always like that, and it always happened when I don't have any work.
Right. Because I was just gonna ask you. You said you're doing the Marriage of Figaro, that Mozart coming up. So over this break, were you taking a break or were you working?
Well, working, but I'm taking a
Okay.
break from my normal work, let's say, with the Vienna
Right.
boy. So, and as you can know, the artist, I mean, you yourself as well. I mean, there's actually no such thing called break almost. I mean,
Right.
eh, yes, sometimes I would take a break from really not listening to music, but you're always in it and you're thinking of your productions, reading the scores, thinking about the plots, and so there's always
Right.
something. Yeah.
Because how could you not? Like my wife sometimes gets on to me because I have as many people do, I have a little notebook. I don't want to call it a journal, but there will be times, and also my phone, but there will be times when we're supposed to, I guess, be having family time. But I might go, oh, I just figured out how to better execute a double stroke. I better
Well,
write this down right now. And she'll say, Mike, well, we're at dinner, or it's our daughter's birthday, or and I'm just like, hey, you knew what this was when we got together, okay? I didn't marry
exactly.
you, then later on tell you, like, oh, by the way, I play music. You knew
Yeah,
what it was.
exactly,
Oh,
exactly.
well, I'm glad you were able to relax a little bit, I hope. And I'm a little bit jealous. I had to go back to work this week. But I'm in Dubai, and the UAE went to a 4-day work week, though. So I guess
Well,
that's pretty good. Yeah, they're trying that Finland model out.
oh, good.
Yeah. So we'll see how that goes. I want to ask you, it says on your bio that you started playing piano when you were 4. And we actually bought a toy piano for my daughter. She's almost 1, and she just kind of bangs on it. I mean, honestly, she doesn't like know much about it. I try to play little melodies on it when she's really not interested in that at all. But I wanted to ask you, what what was music for you in your childhood? How did you kind of get started playing piano? What were your early teachers like? I'm just really interested in, especially as an educator, like I'm really focused on the children's beginning,
Yeah.
especially in Arabia. I'm a lot of these students' first experience in music, and I want to know like what your first experiences were like.
Well, I'm really bad in my memory, but I can only quote what my parents told me, and they actually said they found me singing already when I was 1.
Oh wow.
Um, a very traditional Chinese song, a lullaby, like perfectly in tune,
Yeah.
and my mom is actually, well, my mom is a singer.
Okay.
She teaches music. She's a teacher, but she's actually a trained singer, mezzo soprano, and she has a choir as well. And then my dad is a pastor, but he sings and also sang in a choir, and he played flutes, and he built an organ at home. So we always have some.
Oh,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. He knows how to build those paddle organ that you
yeah.
paddle, those old time, and so maybe the surrounding actually plays a big role. I mean,
Mm.
they did not, and even until when I left home, they did not really push, let's say, like most people think, these Asian parents, these what they call the tiger
Right.
parents, and they never
You're
do
gonna go
that.
to swimming. You're gonna go to violin.
Exactly,
And
exactly,
after that's
exactly.
piano.
They never do that, and somehow one day they saw me, touching, because we have the piano at home, and so I always go back and search for my own notes, and I was always doing that. And so then they brought me to my first piano teacher, which has been with me for basically almost 18 years. No, well, I have to count, no, 12, maybe 12, 13 years of my
Okay.
life before I actually left home. That was my only teachers back in Hong Kong. And this is a really one of the most prestigious musical family, the Yips family, where her husband is actually a great educator, and he has a music center for, like, thousands of students in the world that's
Oh wow.
trained from this place. And so I had really luck to be, let's say, related to that, and grew up. I mean, I was not officially in the center, but I studied with piano with my teacher, and then her husband, he's a conductor, composer, and educator, so he gave me a lot of chance when I grew up.
Yeah.
As I grew up, that play with his orchestra solo, and then he taught me compositions,
Hmm.
and so it's, I think, if you think about, I mean, I'm also like you. Sometimes I get in touch with, now when I have to start teaching some young kids, what do you do? Um, it's really hard to say sometimes because there's actually not a fixed rule to it. I have to say, I have to
Right.
admit, and that all depends because if we teach only based on a method or thinking from outside to mold someone, then I must say this wrong because we're missing the elements that actually are object are variable.
Right.
And they are, I must say, even as a kid, a lot of parents say, well, you have to like do this, so that, they grew up to be this. I have two kids myself, and the first of all, there's no guarantee. And secondly,
Right.
they are from the beginning, from the first second they were born, a individual character.
Hmm.
They are
They're the
someone
main
else.
character in their own book. That's not
Yes, and
we're
no
barely
matter
in
how
it.
your belief or religion or whatever, I have to say we might have genes that is passed on in the body, but their soul is an individual person,
Yeah.
and that you have to respect. And I don't know. I can only say we can give an environment and see what this person will take on.
I think it's cool that I heard this quote once that it doesn't say exactly this, but it says like the next Bill Gates was already born and died in some village, just because of the circumstances of the world. And I think it's amazing that, and you come from a musical family, but it makes me think of how many parents weren't able to recognize, the singing at 1 year old. Oh, he's just babbling. Or the fiddling on the piano and finding your note. Oh, they're just
Yeah.
banging around. But I think it's a blessing that you were in an environment where they were actually able to see that. And it makes me think like how many kids hit a golf ball and his parents just said, oh, that's just, and they didn't. The next Tiger Woods just got discouraged, and
Yeah.
I think I'll try to take that with me and pay attention see if my daughter does anything amazing, make sure that I try to nurture that.
Yeah.
That's great. I will ask you a few questions kind of geared towards our educators. And I think for myself, that's taught choir many times. The fact that you deal with the boys is really interesting to me because there's a lot of science about boys that age and their voices, especially. So I want to ask you, you work with the Vienna Boys Choir, and that's obviously a very elite musical experience for them. And I want to ask you, what do you see them getting out of an experience like that? And if you could bottle up one thing from that experience that you could give to every child for free, what would it be? I'm always interested in what the experience is like in an ensemble like that for the student, and like something that maybe other educators could try to emulate, like that feel or that vibe that's in those rooms.
Mm. Well, if I have to, make it into really concise, like an elements, then for me the only thing I can say is chance.
Mm.
Especially for boys at this age, um, it's really they are at the age of changing and searching, and they're really moody. Actually, I have to say, as they
Yeah.
grow. I mean, maybe not 10 years old, but because we normally have 10 to 14. But then you can tell every year they change really rapidly, and so I always amazed that when you see a kid and then you compare those photos when you first take them,
Yeah.
and then when they graduate from me, which is like I don't
They
know how
got
many.
pimples, a
Yes,
girlfriend.
and then exactly, it's like it's crazy. But what I want to say is that because it's hard to compare if you there are many elements, of course, from the Vienna boys that actually is very really valuable and what they get out of, but it after all it is we are institutions that is already founded so long, and it has a what we call Bedarf in German. It's already built-in chance opportunities. Like we're highly demand for these concerts tours, and people would pay for it, and then so these boys are trained to already have a chance to to perform. And
Right.
of course that you cannot really demand for every other institutions or ensembles, because we have a name already.
Right.
And of course, but still, it's still about a chance, because the chance you're giving them these opportunities, and then if there's any ensembles, any other kinds, it's all about they have a chance to sing together.
So maybe what I'm hearing, and you can correct me, what I'm hearing is if we can transfer a little bit of that Vienna Boys Choir magic to some other choir, let's say back home in Columbus, Georgia, it's creating some performance opportunities for them. People come to you because they know they're going to perform. And that kind of creates a certain environment, maybe. And it's important for people to make sure that your choirs, your bands, your piano students are having that opportunity too, that chance to do something.
Well, this is absolutely true and correct, and it is actually for every. It's not just any choir ensembles, but for any individual artist. I of course now in Vienna, it seems like there are more stuff to do with music, but as a musician growing up in Hong Kong or any some other place, or even maybe a small town in America, uh, you might be a great talent, but there's still not enough audience or outlet that you could really develop. And it's of course it's a luxury to be in Vienna, or even any singers in German speaking worlds. And at least there's enough theater to still
Right.
host something. While if you are opera singers in other places, that you just don't know where you can sing,
Right. Just
stage.
stand outside.
And then you end up and you end up teaching. It's okay, that's fine, but you have to be on stage. And and
Yeah.
and and the same thing with these boys. And I mean, we of course suffered now from COVID, and it's not so much just simply to say because we don't have income or cancellations. It's for me the worst is for the kids that actually we still practice, but then they don't get to sing in front of public.
Yeah.
And a lot of times actually when I finally say, oh, before, because we sang almost too much, and now it's like when I say finally we have concerts not canceled, we're gonna go on stage, and then they were so happy, and they were just like all geared up, and so even sometimes boys are generally maybe sometimes lazy, or like you don't want to do this, or at this age
Mhm.
they just want to do nothing. But then when you finally give them a task, which is to say, hey, there's a concert, there's
They
something,
want to do
then
it.
they would do it. And so this is what I meant, that this kind of chance you got to offer them, and I think it needs to be from the society and from the educator to arrange that kind of thing.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know why, but I just thought of this memory of I used to practice snare drum in my house when I was young. And I would always say, Dad, I want to play this etude for you. And he'd always say, I've been hearing you practice it for an hour. Like, why do you need to perform it for me now? I've been hearing it. And I think even as a youth, I was maybe trying to give myself that chance. Like, I have to perform this. I'm not just practicing for nothing. Like, come on, Pops, support me.
It's true. It's definitely true. It's definitely true. Yes.
So this question here is for all you choral educators out there. How do we build confidence in our young men singing? Choir directors all around the world are lacking tenors and basses in their middle school choirs, in their high school choirs. I feel like the boys are at that age where they can't really control their voice, or really they can't really control anything. And the Vienna Boys Choir, they always sing so confidently in addition just to their sound. And I know they're a special group, but how do we get our young men to be more confident singing, and how do we get them to be even just more interested in singing?
I can only say that it's one of our hidden, let's say, secret, or people will say, well, how did Vienna boys train? Or how, is there a special method, or why are they like this and that? And I did not know until, of course, I start working here, and it's 8, 9 years now, almost 10 years, a decade. And the only secret to it is a daily practice.
Hmm.
And I think singers, even I don't know, but maybe may correct me wrong. Maybe I'm just too stereotyped, but most singers practice actually not as much as a pianist or a violinist or
Hmm.
any instrumentalist. And I don't know why. And of course, people would say, well, because your voice is delicate and things like this. And of course, I'm not talking about, you really do 10 hours a
Right.
day, but a general of a frequent, or let's say regular training, like piano playing, daily an hour, and repeat the
Right.
stuff. And this is sometimes singers are maybe lacking in the beginning of their careers.
Hmm. I
Only the
think
really,
it's like their instrument is too accessible. Like
yes,
for me, I had to get up and go to a practice room to go practice. So, but maybe for the singers, they always feel like, well, I can practice anytime,
yes,
that they forget
but
now
then
is
they
the
don't.
best time.
And of course, and in fact, because I used to marry the singers, and I work with singers a lot, of course, and I know very much that there's very few singers could practice and learn by themselves.
Hmm.
And so it's always needed to have a coach or someone that is
Yeah.
warm you up and things. Because my boys, my own sons, they were both also in my choir. They were both Vienna boys, and even them at home, if they have to have some performance, I have to warm them up,
Yeah.
and they can't do it by themselves. And so I'm just saying, for art choir directors, or in general, uh, try to build in this kind of a rehearsal schedule that you don't have to be long, but regular. Because
Right.
these boys, to be honest, we don't always just take the best boys or best voice, or there's sometimes you don't have a choice, and we'll have to take whatever we have. And and sometimes we have a weaker one, but in 4 years, if they train with us, because we have basically every day rehearsals,
Hmm.
doesn't matter what, and they come to it, it's like going to school, because we are at
Yeah.
school, and we are at school, and in the school the rehearsal time is part of the school schedule.
Yeah.
So it's like you do math every day, you do English every day. So this is the same thing. You do singing every day, and then they have singing teachers, and to check the voice. And so in that sense, there are even kids that I have sometimes from the beginning, they cannot match pitch, and after a year or two, they will have to be able to do it. So that is how you generate the interest, and create a group that is, let's say, flexible, and to be able to cope with the repertoire and things. And I mean, talk about repertoire, that's another element, which of course we have to do the mass every Sunday at the Imperial Chapel,
Hmm.
which they requires us to do Mozart, Schubert, all the classic,
Right.
not very big one, but the classic one, Haydn, Mozart, which for me that's is combination, the daily practice and these kind of repertoire, and that's how you create a sound and a voice.
That's funny you say that. And you may hear, well, you have children, so you understand. I have an 11-month-old. Uh, I was listening to the Bach Magnificat
Yeah, yeah,
the other
nice.
day in the car, and my wife was asking me, like, where can we go to hear music like this? And I was thinking, like, you could maybe go to Europe and like go to a cathedral in Dubai, probably nowhere. But that's awesome for those parishioners that they have that experience every week to be hearing that. That's how that
Yeah,
music's supposed to be enjoyed, and that's
yeah.
awesome. That's awesome. I want to ask you because you're a frequent guest artist in different capacities. I know you travel a lot and work, and a lot of people like me have been doing a lot of master classes. I've always done a lot of master classes in clinics. A lot of people are doing that more virtually now. But when you're walking into those new settings, working with new people constantly, do you have any tips, even for our CommonTime artists, as they start to do more and more sessions around the world? Do you have any tips for the traveling artist that's maybe working with new people every month or every week, and kind of how you adjust to that, like conducting new orchestras? And
Mm.
yeah, like how do you have any tips for the traveling artist?
Um, well, I think it's, first of all, go with your logic, which, go with, you have to be, well, I mean, there are different characters, but for me, I always keep myself open mind, first of all.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people might go into a new environment with a set mind already of what your old habits,
I'm gonna
and
do this.
yes, exactly. And I mean, there are also a lot of conductors that actually plan their rehearsals, like, they already planned.
Yeah.
But I once heard from, Daniel Barenboim has said, you can't really plan rehearsals. I mean, you know the music, then you go in and then you rehearse. And it's the same thing with teaching, or or rehearse, or whatever you go in. For me, I have to see what my group is, and then I work from there.
Right.
And so this kind of open mind, I think you have to be well prepared yourself, and then you just have to be open. And for me, actually, that's always exciting for me. It doesn't matter, actually. I like to meet new groups, because then this for me is always a challenge. And it's like meeting a new girl. I don't know. But I mean, forgive me to say that, but like, it's like you're meeting new people, new friends, and then you're just trying to work it out and see, what this person's about. And it's the same thing with the group. um um I think that, and as I said, try not to think so much of your own plan. The tip would be, actually, that's the most important, to give up your standard first,
Yeah.
and then to see, because they will always surprise you. They will always surprise you. Um, um, so, but I think you have to be very, which my teacher used to teach me, that actually it's very important to, in the first 1 minute, actually, almost
Mm-hmm.
give it two, maybe, when you get in touch with the orchestra, when you give the upbeat, or when you even talk to the orchestra manager, those moments are the key moments to get your impression,
Yeah.
whether you give them impression or they give you an impression. And those are the places that you have to be, I think, just be awake.
Yeah. Yeah. And receptive. I mean, I've had guest conductors where just from how they introduce themselves, I go, here we go. Like, this will be a long day.
But you see,
Yeah.
like that kind of thing, for example, I never even talk. When I come into a new rehearsal, the first rehearsals, and I just say hello,
Right.
and yeah, and I'm, yeah, happy, and then we just say, okay, today's program, and then we just go.
Let's go. Pull out the Mozart. All right. Just, I
And
like what you said about plans, and I think that can really go for any teacher in any setting. And this is what I kind of see as a downfall of the U.S. education system. And I'm working in a U.S. system school now, but for all this money that gets funneled to these school systems, the government is trying to get as data driven as possible, which any corporation would do. But, as maybe we learned with US politics of the last several years, we are actually, in fact, not a corporation. And they're really strict on these lesson plans. You got to have these lesson plans. And I remember in a faculty meeting speaking up saying, you're asking for such a large amount of detail when my lesson plan, I said, here's a few activities I know I want to try. Here are the standards, like we need to sing together. That's my standard. Everything else, though, I'm not married to it. And the fact that you're making me submit these plans in ink, it's like you're making me marry this woman I just met yesterday. And I might not want to do that.
Well, that was actually very good analogy. It's true. It's exactly that. And a lot of people also ask me for a plan, but I cannot give you a plan. I don't even know that person yet.
No, I really don't. It's so just I hate to keep interjecting, but just yesterday, I'm a Vic Firth, or I don't know if you know, they're a drumstick company, but I get called out to do things because of that. So yesterday, I was doing a virtual snare drum clinic with some students. I thought they were going to be 14 and 15 in like Hyderabad and Mumbai and Delhi in India. So I had this whole plan of I'm going to do this and this, because I'm thinking these kids are 14, 15. They're going to be able to do this. And I want them to have a real observable outcome because they're old enough to be able to know, like, I didn't learn anything. Okay. So I get to the class and the students are actually like 8, 9, 10, 11. Okay, so that was my first thing I saw. I saw that and I said, okay, this is way different than what I thought. And kind of in that moment's notice, I had to just switch off everything that I thought I was going to do and kind of pivot because, they need to have fun. All of them didn't even have drumsticks. I had to kind of differentiate what I was going to do to make sure they all were able to participate and things like that. And you heard it here, educators. You got to stay open. And I'll tell you, don't tell your principal, but even if they made you write lesson plans, you don't have to do that. You don't have to do it. And you heard it. Jimmy said it himself. You can tell your principal Jimmy told you it was cool.
So I'm on his side. So you can all. I'm on Michael's side. I totally agree. I mean, I have once actually even really said it in public. I said, because people said, what's your method? And I said, no method is my method.
Yeah. Because it's an art. It's not called a master of science in conducting.
No.
There's no master of science in teaching. It's a master of arts for a reason.
Yeah.
I want to tell you a short little story that leads into my next question. Okay. And I learned this actually in a world music class. Shout out to Dr. Green. Yamaha, that company that somehow makes both pianos and motorcycles, when they began in Japan, they went on this campaign to kind of phase out traditional music and introduce Western music because they had decided that they wanted to sell pianos. So what they did was they made these new pianos that were a lot cheaper than, let's say, your European model, like the great pianos that were popular at that time. The Yamaha upright baby grands were a lot more affordable for the average guy or person. So what they would do is they would sell you a piano, very affordable. They would give you all the classics for free. So they give you books of Mozart. They give you all the Beethoven sonatas. They give you anything that was public domain. They're pretty much giving to the people. And then they also started a system where they were giving away free private lessons. So it's like, not only will we sell you this piano for cheap, but we'll bring you back to the showroom every week let you sit down with teacher so and so, and through that, they kind of injected Western classical music into this society that previously was only doing like the no operas and traditional Japanese arts. So around this time, you start seeing this uptick of Japanese classical music stars. One of the most popular for me as a percussionist is Keiko Abe. She is a very famous marimbist. But after World War II, you get Seiji Ozawa, who is part of this kind of first class of Japanese classical music superstars after Yamaha has kind of led this cultural revolution to introduce Western music to Japan. And it said in your bio that you got a chance to work with him. And I want to ask you what it was like studying with someone like that. And if he ever talked about Bernstein or Karajan or told you any like secret stories in your lessons that you could share, this is an exclusive that you could share with us here. I told you I have these picture books. Most of the Ozawa pictures are of him conducting. The book of Bernstein pictures is mostly pictures of him smoking. And the Karajan picture book is mostly pictures of him frowning at different people. So, what was it like studying with Ozawa? And like, what did you take from that? That's such a landmark experience. What was it like?
Well, I must say, since you mentioned these three guys, when I growing up, this is exactly these three guys' pictures I have in my wallet. In fact.
Okay, they're the
we
goats.
used to, I mean, in Hong Kong, we used to have, I don't know, these kind of record, companies, and then they sometimes would pass out like, they used to print these calendars, and in these calendars at the back they would have these portraits of these great stars and artists, and I collected Karajan, Bernstein, and Ozawa. And I put them in my pocket, in my wallets, in fact. And I just these three guys, really look up on them. I really like that. I would like to be one of them. And I really did not expect that actually later in my life, actually I'm living in the city where Karajan, lived before and conducted, and Bernstein as well. And in fact, in Vienna, there's even a street called Leonard Bernstein Street.
Wow.
And then Ozawa became the director of the State Opera. And I basically got a chance to study with him. And he took me to Japan to his festival. At that moment, there's a Rome Music Festival it's called. And it was the first year. And then I was one of the, conductors that got picked to do a masterclass with him.
Wow.
And
crazy.
Well, I have to say my experience, how do I phrase it? I mean, when you're working with finally to, in this kind of, let's say, level of artist, you don't always get it right away. I can only say.
It's like they're speaking another language.
Yes, and then, and I see it myself now sometimes even too when I treat other people, but I mean, I'm trying to be, be kind. The thing is, because you immediately approach a problem or a piece of music with a understanding that you think everyone should understand already, a basic. So when you then if you only start from that level to teach, to go on, then it is missing something.
That's what people say about Kobe Bryant. Like Kobe or Michael Jordan, especially Michael, because Michael can't teach you how to. He just can't understand why you don't know how to do this.
Exactly. And that was like I struggled actually at the beginning, for a week, and then later, I have to admit, I understood him almost several years later, or even more, 10 years. I mean, that was back then. That was almost like from now, it's almost 20 years ago.
Right.
And but I think it was a great. It has to happen. It has to take place.
Yeah.
And it actually, for such an experience, you might not think that you're getting a lot out of it from that moment, but it's always a let's say stimulating
Yeah.
uh, time where it happens later. It will come back to you.
That's kind of the mark of a great master. It's like if even I don't know why I'm thinking about religion, but it's like you read like Jesus doesn't make sense today. It makes sense 10 years later when you go, oh, now, like when you maybe because you have to be in those situations that they're describing, maybe before you fully understand. And I was listening to someone that was talking about Buddhism, and he was kind of talking about how these gurus kind of live on this plane that's a little bit outside of time,
Hmm.
the way that their spirit works. So when they're explaining things to you, it doesn't make sense. But
Yeah.
then in 5 years, you have maybe a moment like you may have had where you go, oh, that kind of makes sense. And I think that's kind of the mark of some of these great minds, that their thinking is not always as, timeline linear as we like it to be. And it's, yeah, you just don't understand it till later. That's
Well,
great.
it's true. It's true. An experience, of course, and you have to be in that situation to understand
Right.
why.
Yeah. That hearing you tell that story reminds me there was this rapper that in your story of how you got to work with Ozawa, there was this rapper who had this word called griming, where he said it was grinding plus timing. So it's like the timing allowed you to meet him, but the grinding made him care about you. Because there's a million people in Vienna when he got there.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
There was probably 1,000 conductors too when he got there also. But it's the work and then the timing is kind of what creates that fortune. I like
Well,
that.
it's true. The timing and actually everything, in even in music itself, the timing of the conducting, the timing of your career, the timing of expressing a certain phrase, the timing actually in life is important. I mean,
I am recently I'm the timpanist with the National Symphony here in UAE. And it when I found out we were moving here, I emailed the music director and said, greetings. I'm in America now, but here's some videos of me playing. I would like to maybe meet with the principal about joining the substitute list. And then he emails me back and says, well, actually, because of like COVID and visa problems, our entire like two percussionists and the timpanist have like fled the country. So he goes, I want to see you play in person when you get here. And I mean, there wasn't like a full formal audition where they put out a national search and cut to finals. And I think just because of the timing of my arrival here and their upcoming concert dates, that
Mhm.
was my timing. But then also when it was time to play, I had to play, and that was my work. So it was
Wow.
also like the timing, but I still had to be ready.
Of course, yes.
Um, what was your pandemic like? Were you doing a lot of work on the computer? Like, what were you doing virtual stuff?
Yes, I mean, I wish actually I could cut down on it a little bit because sometimes I found that I just looking at the screen a lot,
Yeah.
because you end up having so many emails that you need answered, and then checking the social media has become even more present in
Yeah.
one's life, and then in the beginning of the pandemic, we have to also try to do these kind of online classes and things with
Mhm.
the school and even with the boys, but it of course didn't work. But of course, later we are allowed at least to have presence, just, classes. Otherwise, I've been, of course, I have teach. I've been teaching online. I have a student from Japan, I have a student from Singapore, a student from India,
Mhm.
but otherwise mostly in Vienna.
Yeah. Maybe that's
And
one of the beauties of the virtual stuff is that you do get that student from Singapore now, and you do have that student in India that you
yes,
probably wouldn't have had before.
exactly. I mean, because there's a need in it, of course, but at the same time, of course, it's still to teach music in that way. It's really difficult.
It is. And I taught music online in China for 18 months. And there is no getting good at it. And it lacked that essence of music making that made it
Well,
difficult to keep going to work every day.
of course, there are things in the air. There. You don't touch. At a certain level, you have to be able to touch physically to that person to show
Right.
more of really actually what you mean of this touch on the piano, like
Yeah.
breath. Um,
Yeah.
and for me, there's nothing can substitute live. Um,
No.
and but and of course, like even with dynamics, you can't really through the computer to really know. Sometimes I actually have to ask my students, do you really play like this or just the internet?
Or is it right? Like, or is it the audio processing?
I know, and sometimes like you have this kind of even with the you can choose like with Zoom. Sometimes you can choose like original sound or whatever, but
Right.
for musicians, it's not enough difference. And you know
Right.
what I mean? We have such a sharp ears that
Right.
uh, we're looking for really, really contrast. We're
With these
looking
nuances,
for
and it's
colors,
not
yes,
there.
nuances, and those are the thing that is missing.
I learned a lot working with CommonTime about how that works. So they say essentially, so and now the our video conferencing that we're doing now does this, I think, really well. But other ones, essentially what happens is I'm talking. That sound is going into this mic.
Yeah,
It's getting put into code and then it's getting compressed to cut the size of that file. Then they're sending that file to you, and then your computer is trying to reverse engineer that file and then play it to you.
yeah.
So, on behalf of your students, they do not actually sound like that. They're actually sound great. It was just the computer.
I know. I
And
know. I know.
you talking about physical touch? Just yesterday, I had this student who was holding a drumstick like this and not
Mm,
like this, like
mm.
this. And I kept telling them, like, you need to turn your hand over. And then they turned it like this. And I'm like, no, not that much. Like, you need your fingers facing down. And then they like did something like this. But all I needed to do was just
Exactly.
1 second. Ay,
Yeah,
ay, ay.
yeah.
Um,
I mean, there are a lot like you have show, show, but
yeah. What can
touch.
we do? What
Yeah.
can we do? As you know from working with us, Common Time is all about these cross cultural connections. And I want to ask you about the Hong Kong Vienna Music Festival. Just what's that all about? Is it still happening? And what was that journey like of kind of connecting those cultures?
Well, it all began was 2016, I think.
Okay.
I mean, there's a lot of background there. I don't want to phrase it here. It unfortunately it's not going right now.
Oh,
It stopped already quite a while. I don't know. Maybe they still do it. The original idea of mine was to connect these two cities, especially the cities that where I related the
yeah.
most. One is my home, and the other is my second home. And those are the two places that I lived longest. These two cities, and I have friends from these two places. And the original idea was to have the festival where we in the summer where it will take place in both cities, and
Okay.
in Vienna we'll have the Hong Kong people here, musicians,
Hmm.
and in Hong Kong we have the Viennese there.
Yes, and the Viennese over there. Okay.
And of course, and it could have a lot of things could happen is to have, either we have joint ensembles, or like we have, the artists play in Vienna, and then the artists from Vienna would join, in Hong Kong, which we did a couple years. The idea was, especially in my heart, is that because I have experienced myself, you grew up as an artist, let's say at a certain level, but still, after all, because of your origin, because of your ethnic, uh, you don't always get the same treatment or
Right.
the same. Just be honest. This is just simply is real, and is
Oh.
everywhere. And so I
Mhm.
wanted to. Now I have achieved something, especially in Europe as an Asian. I want to at least let the people, my people in Hong Kong, to have a chance to also perform in Europe and at
Yeah.
least be exposed to the European public, where normally it would never come to that point.
Right.
Whether political reason or whatever economic reason, and so that was actually my idea of this festival, is as a platform for them to have. Because the thing is, in Asia, and everyone says, oh, well, but the Asian musicians are great, talented, and they're young, and they always start, as you said, we start young, and then we practice, and we win competitions. But that is always just superficial, because at the end, whether they can get a job,
Right.
whether they can survive with music, and for me, this was always my questions, even as an educator. Why are we producing so much when we are not taking care of how to produce or create a market that could actually host these students?
Right.
And I think this
Yeah.
is not responsible for educators if we're educating them, but to tell them actually at the end, well, but there's no job.
I think a lot of minorities face situations like that where there's kind of this invisible ceiling where it's like, yeah, we'll let you win the Tchaikovsky competition, but are we going to give you a Deutsche Grammophon record deal and let you tour Europe? Maybe not.
Yeah,
And there's like, we'll let you do this and this and this, but it's that last
yeah,
10%,
there's
they're
exactly.
not going to let you get there.
No,
It's
exactly.
kind of like the consolation prize, like here, here, here. Yeah, I definitely know exactly what you mean. I know
And to
exactly
be
what
that
you
winner
mean.
is already also, it's only one step, but then what about all the others that participated?
Right,
And to be even admitted into that, you also have a certain level already. you
right.
know so um I mean, in Hong Kong, I'm sure there's plenty other countries and cities that there's plenty of these students and groups,
Right.
and they're trying to find. So that was my idea in the beginning, and then of course when we brought the Viennese over there, or we did the Mahler Eighth.
Okay. Symphony of
And
a Thousand.
yes, exactly, and I conducted it, and it was on YouTube. You can look at it if you want. And
Okay.
it was a great productions. There were half of the stage were from Hong Kong people, from the Hong Kong Philharmonic, um, um, the local choirs, and even kids. And I brought part of the Vienna Boys and a lot of my friends from the Vienna Symphony and the Radio
Mhm.
Symphony, and then the whole Schoenberg Choir, the Arno Schoenberg Choir.
Oh, yeah.
And so then it was a joint, with both, and it was a great event, and everyone, from Vienna, they were really impressed, and the
Yeah.
experience was great.
That's what music's all about. Those events, like those moments. And I'm sure those people that were there are will never forget that. Like that's not and
No,
Modern Eight's the one to do for that setting. Like
exactly,
that's the one you want to do in a situation like that.
exactly.
That's what Common Time's all about is and that as you know, that's kind of what we're trying to do here is kind of give people a similar experience where they get to meet people from another culture. When I do these weekly webinars, I often ask educators, are you the only musician your students know? You know, and it's like for the Viennese people, is do you know a musician that is not in Vienna right now? Do you know a cellist in Asia? Do you know a conductor from America? And I think these types of connections are important for any type of artist to make sure that they're not, them and their art is not trapped in this bubble.
Yeah.
You talked about methods earlier, and you come up in a method and then you never go outside of these four walls. You don't even see, like, I remember one story is when Hurricane Katrina happened, there was this kid that came from New Orleans, and he was all about like marching band, drumming. I was playing, you know, De La Clue's etudes and Anthony Cerrone, and he showed up just bum, 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 and I was so inside my own bubble that this kid was like blowing, and I realized like, oh, there's so much more than there's so much more than me playing these little French snare drum etudes. Like there's a whole world of drumming that I was not even aware of, and that blew my mind. Like right then.
Yeah. It's true.
I've just got two more questions for you. When you oftentimes are working with professionals or children that I feel more often than not are probably pretty solid. You said sometimes you have better students, weaker students, but how do you keep them inspired? Like, how do you keep a boys choir that's already toured the world 3 times wanting more? I feel like if I had already toured Europe and America 6 times, I might be complacent. I'm it. I'm the guy. Like, what are you going to tell me that I haven't already heard? You've never even been to Russia. Like, how do you keep those people motivated? And I'm hoping that our educators out there could take something from this. If they're maybe struggling keeping their students inspired and motivated, inspiration is one of the best parts of music, oftentimes lacking.
Well, I take this from, let's say, from a really pure artistic point of view, which I consider why I'm being an artist, is that we're never satisfied, and we're always looking for perfection, but you never find it.
Right.
And that is a kind of a key, or how I work with my kids. Even if they're kids, but I train them in that directions. I treat them, let's say, professionally. And they like that, actually, because they feel like, wow, Mr. Chiang is treating us with respect.
And it gives them agency, like they're in control of their own experience. Like they're not
exactly. And I am very strict, and I really demand a lot. And I think, I mean, of course, you have to get this into a group, if this kind of rhythm, that they really they know what you expect, and they know what they have to expect to we move towards this goal. And that's the only, let's say, motivations that we can do, is to know there's always something. Once you achieve certain thing, like for example with the boys, we travel, of course, around the world, and sometimes same program we have to sing 30 times in a month,
Right.
well, in 2 months, let's say, and what do you do with them? And and I would, every time I would have to try something new, or like I would, and during the performances, try not to become a routine.
Yeah, like you're not
make
on
always some
autopilot.
changes, and make an echo here all of a sudden,
Yeah.
Just create something.
Let's take some time with this phrase, maybe, or
like one time all of a sudden I said, well, why don't we change the way we stand? Well, why not? And
Yeah.
or and then I mean, sometimes it creates the chaos, but at least then you have to work again.
And
So
you have to be engaged. How did they react to that? Or is the group flexible? Were they kind of like, oh, like, were they anxious about doing something like that?
no, I don't think so. I don't think so. I think it depends how you approach and how you present it. I mean,
Hmm.
if you go to well, let's try, or like, well, why not? Like, if you ask, then they will always say no.
Yeah.
It's more about you have to already have, okay. So that's another thing. Like, to how when you ask me, like, do I have a rest? I actually don't. Christine know this. Uh, the thing is, sometimes I will end up like after a concert, like tonight, and then I sleep there. Okay, what can I do tomorrow? Different.
Yeah.
It's just my mind is constantly like that, and
Right.
sometimes I even do that to my. I even like there's my one of my hobby of my room of my house is that I like to change furnitures. I move them around,
Hmm.
and I always, okay, what else can I want to look like? I want to have a new room,
Yeah. I had
but
a roommate like that who was always like, I'd be trying to sleep, and then you just hear,
oh my
I
God,
go
that's me.
outside. I'm like, you're moving the couch right now? Why? Like,
No, that's me. That's me.
hmm.
And I will
Yeah.
even move my piano, like things.
Hmm.
And but anyway, and so that's for me. It's the motivation is to have a change, and that you demand something better, or like maybe just one day I just want to, okay, let's work on just this melody, just this line with the first soprano. Can we make it even better? Make it more legato?
Yeah.
And there's always something. There's this endless change, and let's say with orchestra, actually, that's this also important. Actually, there's a lot of professional orchestras. You don't really need to rehearse them, but it's more about motivating.
Hmm.
And for me, I learned a lot from the boys, doing with the boys, to know how to treat an adult actual ensemble.
Yeah. Yeah.
And but one thing I have to tell you that with the boys choir, actually, it's not hard to find um, that changes because they are always changing. Uh, there's
Yeah. Their whole life, a 12-year-old boy's
because
whole life is
because
changing.
sometimes all of a sudden one boy the boys change.
Yeah.
Then you have to switch them over to alto, and then like, or like if it's like if it's a soloist, it happens to me several times. The big one of the big star soloists just overnight changed voice. The next day they cannot do.
Good morning, sir.
And I normally have, of course, first, substitute, second substitute, and but still, you have to train them. You have to find time extra, and then you have to find solution to it. What
Yeah.
if what if it's not ready yet? Then how are you gonna do with the old one with a little, imperfection? Still have to make
Yeah.
the show must go on.
The show must go on.
And so that those are the things. I mean, that's what my job actually is being exciting. That's the thing.
There's a Have you ever heard of that TV show called Family Guy?
I think yeah, I remember that.
It's kind of like The Simpsons, like an adult cartoon.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
there's a
yeah.
scene where this kid, he's like, "Hey guys, you want to go play baseball?" Um, yeah, I don't want to play anymore. And it's just funny because sometimes it's that fast. Like the kids will wake up and they can't sing their part. And that's
Yeah,
probably scary for them. I remember Justin Bieber talked a lot about it. And a lot of singers don't make that transition well. And he was able to actually continue his career because
yeah.
when he started, he was a boy soprano. But now
Hmm.
he's singing like a more tenor range. And he said that was a really tough period. Like, how do you put out a record or do a
Yeah, yeah,
live concert when you can barely like
exactly.
you can barely
No,
talk?
it's true. It's true. And I have to cope with it every year, and I mean every several
Yeah,
months.
yeah.
Yeah.
This is Here's the last thing I'm gonna talk to you about. Myself personally, I grew up with like black church music. And through those female singers, I learned about people like Kathleen Battle and Leontine Price.
Oh my
So
goodness.
from a young age, I knew about these divas and about kind of the black vocal tradition, whether that be in the church, whether that's Aretha Franklin, whether it's Diana Ross, or whether it's Kathleen Battle. And I fell in love with opera, and one thing that gets me every time is a soloist with orchestra and choir. I think that's one of the best musical mediums, but I was fortunate in that I found that very early. But for the rest of the youngsters out there, how do we get the young people or just the general public in general more interested in vocal music outside of the radio? Like, how do we get people? Maybe in Vienna, the opera is probably sold out all the time, but there are many other opera companies that are struggling to put butts in seats. And how do
It's
we
true.
get the general public or to get kids more interested in opera or just classical singing in general? There's so much great repertoire out there that's just beautiful, but it seems like they only care about Doja Cat.
Give me a second. I'll just plug this in because it's running
Sure.
out. Um, I totally hear you. Even in Vienna, I mean, we're sometimes worried about what are the next generations and what's going to be like in the future with this, because opera has become you know. I think we have to teach to the school. Um, but the problem is about the opera culture is related normally to the language and to the place that it takes place in the beginning. And it has gone to, let's say, I said the whole development of the music world is that now then we have all these operas at least 10 times recorded on
Right.
record, or if not even
On
more.
DVD, a PBS special, like all of them.
Exactly. And then now it's being put on YouTube's anyway. You can find
Mhm.
basically any conductors conducted from to school productions to Vienna State Opera. And then you get now even the Metropolitan on cinema.
Yeah, they're in the movie theaters. And I found out the Met is they're on NPR, like the radio station. Every
Yeah,
week
yeah.
you can hear it.
And of course, these are happening in the place in the West, let's say the place that where it already has been over flooded with these cultures.
Right.
And then the youngsters, the young generations are not so much in it. I think they're doing all these are trying to catch, but there's not. And at the same time, they're putting out really strange, let's say, staging.
Yeah, or maybe the
Um,
clothing.
and I don't know what are the reasons. I mean, there's a lot of reasons behind. I mean, for sure, there are, and either the stage directors trying to be innovative and thinking, it has to be renewed, updated, what they call. And then maybe they're trying to use, like I have seen recently, even at Don Giovanni, like where people come out in, dressing like nowadays, like my kids, with hoodies and
Jordans.
yeah, and or like the color is always black and white, it's like
Mhm.
gangsters on the street, and they walk even like that, and they sing like this. Um, and they're trying to maybe see to catch, I guess, the new generations. But I don't know how successful that is.
I don't think I even saw this opera company was putting ads for Don Juan,
Mm-hmm.
and they kind of had. Have you heard of that app called Tinder?
Yeah, yeah, of course.
So they had these like Tinder themed and like Match.com themed
Oh my god.
ads. But I was just saying, like, okay, maybe you get a couple kids in the door, but when they realize that this is an opera, are they going to stay to intermission? Like, Like you're trying to make it cool. I think it has to do with today's cartoons do more to tackle social issues than cultural things. Like there's even like they an example is like Charlie Brown. There was a black character in Charlie Brown. So like that's a social issue. But Bugs Bunny did the ring cycle. Bugs Bunny conducted an orchestra. Bugs Bunny played a piano concerto. So I think that's the shift is that young people art went from focusing on an introduction to culture to like an introduction to new societal norms. So
Yeah.
they made parts of society more commonplace, but at the expense of the arts. So like there's no Bugs Bunny of today's cartoons at all.
Well, no, and and that's the thing. I think the operas are not played as much, or the
Yeah.
themes are not played as much in daily life.
Yeah.
And it used to be even used in films, but now, of course, film anyway has its own film music writers and
Right.
things, and they had the original, which is fine as well. But then you lost these the access, and where because there used to be people would say, "I heard this before," and then they would start
Right.
looking for it, and they look for it, and they say, "Oh well, let's try this opera then," because that's what
Yeah.
we used to do. But I think that takes the whole society as well, because now the new generations are so involved in screens and things that they don't have. I have a feeling they don't have the patience or to even go sit.
Yeah.
Or so we're not even talking about an opera, even just the concerts.
Yeah.
Um,
That's so interesting you said that about patience.
and that I think is not just simply we have to teach the opera. It's about teaching how we live our lives. Because if as long as our lives are busy with these technologies, I mean, I'm not saying there's anything wrong with it, but if we don't balance it with something that we can just sit back, like I think the settings, let's say not talk about operas, but simply settings of we all gather together, it's a social event,
Mm-hmm.
sitting there, then there's a maestro come out, then
Yeah.
everything ready, and then everyone dressed up like that.
Yeah. Put a jacket
No,
on. Get,
I don't know how many would do. I mean, the majority of our generations.
mm-hmm.
It seems to me would be only even the rich one or like the high society people. They would still bring their kids that way, but in a normal class, um, even sometimes with my kids, they first they like music, they love music, but when they go to these events, they would not even think about dressing up sometimes.
Right. And you think like, do you not already know that
Yeah,
when you saw the address, you didn't know that you should have put a coat, like put some shoes on, and like put a tie on.
exactly. And of course, and you go to disco, you have the another dress code, of course. But like these
Hmm.
things, it's already lacking of that. And
Yeah.
and then, I mean, through the pandemic, I've been doing a lot of house concerts,
Hmm.
and get to know some, let's say older generation where people where they normally go to the opera theater, but they cannot go anymore, so they come to this house concert. And sometimes you find out that they're actually really normal people to someone to know nothing about music histories, but they know about this opera. They know about the lines,
Yeah.
and and but these are the generation, and our generation. I mean, how would they have patience to go sit there and still even understand the Italian or understand this German here or understand the
Right.
so for me that if we're really want to reintroduce or like do, then it really takes a really big
Yeah.
revolution in how
Yeah.
we introduce, and whether are we ready to even spend money and time to focus on this.
Yeah. Yeah. There was another. I keep talking about rappers. There was another rapper who said that TikTok was the number two music streaming platform behind, I think, Spotify.
Mm.
Okay. Here's the problem with that. He said there's no more incentive to make a song that's longer than 60 seconds.
For
So
example.
even not even talking about opera, there's never going to be a Bohemian Rhapsody again. There's never going to be a Thriller again. There's never going to be any of that. Because he just said, from a business perspective, there is no reason to make a song longer than 60 seconds when TikTok is the number 2 place that your music's going to be heard. What's the point?
Yeah.
And that goes to that patience. If you can do Marriage of Figaro in 60 seconds, it'll be sold out.
Yeah. Wow. Well, but that's not the point.
Right.
The point is all these nuances and the jokes behind. I mean, when I'm studying, it's so much going on in there, and so much text that you have to understand, and there's so much, so many actually funny things, and here and there, and it just to make you think how Mozart and Da Ponte and all those days, how these people created even these scenarios.
Yeah, I always tell my wife, do you think, because nowadays when you're making music digitally, you can hear it and you can go, oh yeah, like that's a hit. I always wonder, do you think Beethoven or Mozart or anyone, do you think they're writing this like, oh, this is incredible? Like, I always wonder that to myself. I know they're usually sitting at the keyboard, but I always wonder if they knew that this was fire. Like, this is amazing.
Yeah. Well, I believe so. I mean, I think especially Mozart. I mean, he's.
Oh well, if anyone knew, he knew.
Yeah. Because when you read his letters and things, when he wrote how he wrote his dad and his sisters, and he will always say, "Oh, this is going to be something." Like he is really confident about it.
Yeah.
And I think he knows what he's doing. For sure.
I think he also thought he could play 6 quarter notes on stage, and that would have been a hit too.
Well, whether it's going to be a hit, which number, I think it's not up to us, of course. Now,
Yeah.
I was actually surprised recently. I read something also about him in Figaro, and that's it was from an English tenor that actually sang at the premiere of the Figaro, and he described how working with Mozart and all those things, and I was surprised actually when he said what's the favorite number of Mozart in Figaro. Was totally surprised for me from out of all the numbers and all how we now they said which numbers are incredible, blah blah blah, and the number, this sextet that in the third act apparently was his favorite.
Wow.
And it was out of my expectation totally.
And that's like probably one of the ones that's it maybe even gets looked over.
Well, it's still great, but it's not my pick. It would not be my pick.
Right. Right. That's interesting. Yeah. And I will tell you, the fact that people don't go to opera houses and things as much has actually helped me. Don't tell my wife this, but I had a span of a few years where I would always take first dates at the symphony. And the people thought like, oh, Michael's so classy. He's so cool. But I'm just thinking like, I'm not classy. You just never been to an orchestra concert before. Like everyone does this. This is a normal thing. This ticket was $20. Like, so it has worked out for me in the past, but I digress.
Well, but you see, this I think it takes. I don't know. I always think that for education, it's not just about school or we educators. It takes really the whole society. It takes the media. Mm-hmm. If the media somehow promote this way, and then okay, Vienna at least still have a little bit of they broadcast at least on a public radio, on a public televisions, concerts, the Salzburg Festival, the New Year's concert, so these are still headlines. Then it still work a little bit. Yeah. But although we're losing already audiences. Yeah.
I don't think we have anything.
But if you're talking about other places, if this is
Yeah,
actually totally elite or even like well, you classical, classical musicians,
yeah.
then then I don't know. It's really hard. I'm also puzzled sometimes how we moved on.
I'm trying to think of if there is anything like that. And see, one issue that we're having too in the States is that everything has become so politicized that half of the country won't even listen to public radio because
Mm.
they've been identified as being of a certain suggestion. Half our
Yeah.
country won't watch public broadcasting, which is the only place you're maybe going to see Andrea Bocelli with an orchestra.
Yeah.
Like that's your only shot to maybe see an orchestra, and half the country won't look at it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of what other type of classical music things are kind of portrayed in the media. Like we see our military bands a lot anytime maybe the president's out or anything like that. But other than that, like there's no even the big orchestras like New York, LA, Cleveland, I don't think people really know them like they used to.
No.
The
Well,
Grammy is during the commercials.
yeah. Well, I think that we slowly also segregate these two things into. On one hand, we're trying to try to popularize, like say, these classical music or group, but at the same time, the producers or marketing, they always demand us, even with the Vienna boys. They said, "Well, can you have some pops, or like, can you do this?" Oh, this is the demand songs that they want to hear. So at the end, they are only wanting to hear us with a pop song.
Right.
But that's for me, okay, that might be just one way to approach, let's say reach out. But it's not really real that you promote
Right.
classical music. Uh, I think we have to really, but again, it comes back to patience because classical music, it's long. It's definitely longer. And it takes a lot more this kind of inside silence and it should be for someone to relax actually in a way to relax from a set kind of busy mind or whatever and and then not to go to even talk about Mahler symphonies, things like this, forget about it. Or
Right.
you say the Ring, who would even if you're not like that kind of it's a different lodge, different club, you
Right.
know, and then you won't. I have even heard from a guy that actually he's now actually in the 70s, and he said his first opera was The Ring or something with the Wagner, and he was 15, and he said his whole life was damaged.
Damaged.
He said damaged. He said damaged, but from classical music damaged, because since then he does not really. He just simply ignore. He just refused to do classical music.
Yeah. And people don't realize that Lord of the Rings movie with Elijah Wood that you like
Mhm.
so much, they don't realize all the recent day tellings of Don Juan. How many? It makes you think. How many? That would be a great research for someone to do. How many times have we really seen the ring cycle? Because the answer would be a lot. How many times have we really seen Don Juan? A lot. Like how many Playboy movies have there been about basically this guy's Don Juan? And
Mhm.
there's because of that lack of knowledge, we lose the appreciation for that original. I'm trying to think of other examples, but I'm sure there's plenty of them where a lot of these stories that keep getting recycled come from this time, but people just don't know. They just care about Elijah Wood, but they don't care about poor old Wagner. Jimmy, our session is going to end here in a few minutes. I
Sure.
wanted to say thank you for taking this time. I hope you had a good time. I really enjoyed speaking to you. You're a great conversationalist, in addition to all your other trades. And I tried to tailor these questions in a way so that all the different members of our community, whether they were an artist or an educator or they're running some type of organization or just an individual music lover or arts lover, would get something out of the knowledge that you chose to come share with us today. So for that, I am truly grateful. And
Well, you were
like
very
you
welcome.
said, Marriage of Figaro streaming live right here in CommonTime online. If you're looking at the website, you can go to the arts organizations tab at the top and see that. So are you going to be going out to Italy?
Yes, next week on the 15th, I fly even very early in the morning, 6 o'clock, because on the
Mm.
14th I still have a concert with the Vienna boys in Vienna.
Hey, working hard. You're a
So,
hustler. You're hustling.
but let's hope everything goes well, and the show will be on the 22nd and 23rd of this month.
22nd and 23rd. Now make sure, don't tell them to change how they're standing right before the concert, okay?
Yeah, okay.
Thank you so much, sir. I really appreciate it. And thank you, everyone, for tuning in and listening. Thank you, Jimmy.
Greg, have a
Bye.
nice one. Bye.